Rome, 121 years before Christ. Beneath the oil lamps of a marble atrium, a girl knelt on cold tile. Her back was straight, her eyes fixed on her father's sandals. Her name was Livia. She was 17, and she was about to be erased. In this city, law was not always written in the forum. Sometimes it sat behind a wax tablet and spoke with a quiet voice. A Roman father, if he believed his daughter had brought shame to the family, did not need proof. He did not need a magistrate. The paterfamilias could end her life as easily as he could sell a slave or cast out a son. It was called patria potestas, the power of the father, and it was older than the republic itself. The law did not always need a courtroom. Sometimes it lived in a man's posture, in the silence of his wife, in the way his sons looked away when he entered the room. Patria potestas was the bedrock of Roman life. It gave every father complete control over his household, not just while his children were small, but for as long as he lived. A grown son could not own land without his father's approval. A married daughter could not make offerings at the family shrine without permission. And if a daughter disobeyed, or worse, brought shame to the family's name, a father could do what he deemed necessary. There were no trials for such things, only consequences. Most fathers did not exercise the full extent of their rights, but every daughter knew they could. Livia had grown up in a household of rules. She had not once raised her voice. She walked modestly, spoke rarely, and accepted her engagement to a much older senator without protest. She had done everything she was taught to do, but none of that mattered when the letter arrived. Folded in linen, no name, no seal. Just a sentence: "Your daughter walks at night." Not alone. Livia's father had not asked her if it was true. In Rome, truth was less important than perception, and perception was poison. He had read the message in silence, then ordered the doors of the house shut. Livia was summoned, her sandals removed, her ring taken from her hand. No accusations, no evidence, only the slow, deliberate ritual of judgment that came from within the walls of a private home. Rome called itself a republic, but inside a domus, the will of one man was still absolute. That night, as the lamps flickered low, Livia's mother could be seen sitting in the corridor, unmoving. Her eyes were red, her lips were closed, and her hands were shaking not from cold, but from the terrible truth of Roman law. A father did not need to be right, he only needed to be certain. Livia had always moved like someone who understood walls could listen. Even in childhood, she spoke carefully, walked with measured steps, and kept her eyes lowered when her father entered a room. He was not cruel, he was not warm. He was Roman. In the household ledger, he recorded her birth next to the names of the family's oxen and imported amphorae. He did not speak to her directly until she was 12, when he arranged her betrothal to Senator Velleius Maro, a man old enough to have served in 3 provinces. Livia had nodded. That was enough. Obedience did not need applause, and in Rome, a daughter's silence was considered a virtue. The day before the letter came, Livia had sat in the peristyle garden with her mother, shelling peas into a bronze bowl. The birds were louder than usual. The sky was heavy. Her mother asked if she liked the color of the new tunic, a soft wine red, suitable for her upcoming engagement ceremony. Livia had smiled faintly. Then the maid burst in, face pale, clutching a folded cloth. Her hands trembled as she gave it to the steward, who passed it to the master of the house. No one spoke. No one needed to. When the father read the letter, his face did not change. He dismissed the maid, then he dismissed everyone. The next morning, Livia awoke to find her sandals missing, her comb taken, and her betrothal ring absent from its wooden box. Her hair was not braided. Her food was left at the edge of the room like offerings to a temple idol. She was not told what she had done, only that she would not be attending the engagement ceremony. Her brothers no longer looked at her. Her mother stopped entering the room. The silence, once familiar, now felt sharp, shaped, weaponized. There had been no walks at night, no secret meetings. She had gone to the garden once, sleepless, to cool her face. She had sat beneath the olive tree, watched the moon move through the sky, and returned before dawn. Perhaps someone had seen her. Perhaps no one had. Perhaps the letter was a lie. But a Roman father did not need a chain of logic. He needed a reason to protect the family name. And in that house, Livia's existence had become a risk. Even innocence, once doubted, became indistinguishable from guilt. That afternoon, her uncle arrived. He did not greet her. He went straight to the tablinum, where her father was already seated. A scroll was unrolled. Wax was heated. Livia stood in the corridor, barefoot, her hands clenched in the folds of her tunic. Her heart beat louder than the footsteps. And when her father finally looked up from the scroll and said her name aloud for the first time in months, it did not sound like a summons. It sounded like a sentence. The tablinum smelled of ink and dust and the faint sharpness of old oil. Livia had stood in it only once before, when she was a child and had dropped her writing tablet. Her father had not looked up then. He had only said, without turning, that daughters should not enter places where decisions are made. Now she stood again at its threshold, older, quieter, and with no tablet to hide behind. Her father was seated at the far end. Her uncle stood beside him, one hand resting on the stone ledge, as if it were a judge's bench. The third man, a family friend and former military tribune, leaned against the column with arms crossed. None of them gestured for her to enter, but she stepped forward anyway. Slowly, barefoot, her soles cold against the tile. She did not speak. She knew not to. Her father's voice was calm, almost disinterested. He did not ask if the letter was true. He did not ask where she had gone, or why. He asked only if she understood the damage. Livia blinked once, but kept her eyes fixed on the floor. A rumor was a crack in the stone. A hesitation in a betrothal could mean insult to the senator's family. There were no trials for what had been done, or not done. Only decisions, made here, in this room, beneath her father's seal and her uncle's nod. The tribune spoke softly of what was required to preserve reputation, of the cost of leniency, of the danger in hesitation. He said the house must be purified, restored, and a daughter, no matter how beloved, must not be permitted to rot the root. Livia did not cry. Her hands remained at her sides. When her father looked at her again, he did not see the girl he had once held as an infant or the child who had once traced letters beside his sandals. He saw a question, and questions were dangerous in Rome. He raised his hand, briefly, then lowered it. The decision had been made. It had always been made. The formality was merely for memory, for the quiet agreement among men that something necessary had occurred, and that no one would speak of it after. She was not told the method, only that it would be done before the next moon, that she would not leave the house again, that her name would not appear in the records of the engagement, that her mother would not attend. The men rose slowly, as if from a long and tiresome task. Her uncle patted her head once. Her father did not touch her at all, and the tribune murmured something about virtue not hers, but the family's. Livia remained standing after they left, not because she had been ordered to, but because she no longer knew where else she belonged. In the days that followed, the house grew quieter, though no one would have thought that possible. The servants walked with softer steps. The dogs were kept in the outer courtyard. Even the fountain in the garden was drained, as if the sound of water might disturb something sacred or shameful. Livia was not confined to a cell. She was not shackled or struck. There were no marks on her skin. But every freedom she had once known, however small, was stripped away with such precision that even cruelty bowed to it. Her hair, once carefully arranged each morning by her maid, was left tangled. Her meals were plain and placed far from the hearth. Her bed was removed. A straw mat was laid on the cold marble floor, beneath a window that never opened. The ritual was not named, but it was followed all the same. Her father had sent a small offering to the temple of Vesta, asking the goddess to cleanse the stain upon his household. A goat was slaughtered in secret. A scribe removed her name from the dowry scroll. One by one, the signs of her place in the family were peeled away, like flaking paint from a fresco. When she passed through the corridors, the eyes of servants dropped, not in reverence but in fear, as if she carried illness, as if to meet her gaze might make them complicit. Her youngest brother cried once, reaching for her hand, but their mother pulled him back so quickly he stumbled. That night, Livia heard whispered arguments through the wall. The words were muffled, but the pain in her mother's voice was not. It rose, once, like a bird startled from sleep, then silence again. By the third day, the story had been decided. Livia had fallen ill. A fever, they would say, swift and sudden. The engagement would be delayed, then quietly redirected to a more suitable match. A girl from a family with no scandal, no ghosts. The neighbors would grieve politely, the senators would nod, and Rome would keep moving, untouched. But inside the house, a different script was being followed. Livia would be given to the gods. Not in the open, not with ceremony, but with quiet necessity. Her death would not be recorded as punishment. It would be purification, restoration. Her father had said the ancestors would understand, that the old ways were still sacred, even if whispered, that what was done in silence could still be holy. In her chamber, Livia watched the light move across the wall. It changed color as the hours passed from gold to blue to gray. No one had spoken to her since the decision. But she had come to understand that in Rome, silence was its own language, and it had already spoken. Her mother had aged in a single night. The lines around her eyes deepened, and the gray in her hair shone brighter than the oil on the lamps. She moved through the house like someone carrying a secret she did not choose, stepping lightly, speaking little, watching every doorway as if each might swallow her whole. For years, she had lived within the walls of duty, obeying her husband, tending the shrine, raising the children with patient hands. But obedience had limits, even in Rome. And a mother's grief had sharp edges that no law could soften. When she entered Livia's chamber near dusk, the air tightened. She closed the door quietly, though no one was listening. Livia rose from the mat, her eyes hollow from days without rest. Her mother knelt beside her, smoothing the tangled hair from her daughter's forehead, as if brushing dust from a marble statue. For a moment, neither spoke. Then her mother drew from her sleeve a small clay vial, sealed with wax. It was filled with herbs usually used to ease childbirth pains, steeped in honey to mask their bitterness. A sleeping draught, a gentle one, meant for mercy, not escape. Her mother's voice trembled as she explained what she could. That the ritual chosen for Livia had roots in the oldest customs, the ones whispered about but rarely practiced, the ones that spoke of cleansing, of restoring balance, of sending a daughter back to the gods who had lent her life. Her father believed he was preserving the house. Her mother believed he was tearing it apart. Livia listened without blinking, not in shock, but in resignation. She had known Rome too long to expect rescue. Her mother pressed the vial into her hands, guiding her fingers around the cool clay. She did not tell her to drink it. She did not tell her not to. She simply held Livia's face between her palms and whispered an apology that was older than language. A mother's apology for a world she could not change, for laws written without women, for daughters caught between honor and silence. Livia leaned into the touch, allowing herself to breathe for the first time since the letter arrived. Her mother kissed her forehead, then her hair, then her hands, as if blessing each part before it was lost. Outside, footsteps passed in the corridor, slow and uncertain. The uncle, the tribune, men preparing for a task they would never speak of. Her mother stiffened, then pressed a final kiss to Livia's cheek. She stood with effort, gathering her composure like a cloak, and wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. Before she opened the door, she turned back once more, not with hope, but with defiance, a quiet rebellion that could not save her daughter, but could spare her suffering. She mouthed the words Livia had waited her whole life to hear, words forbidden, useless, and far too late. You deserved more. Then she slipped into the corridor, letting the shadows swallow her grief. The night felt different from the others, as if the air itself had grown heavy with unspoken grief. Livia sat on the edge of her straw mat, holding the clay vial between her palms. The sweet scent of honey clung to her fingers. Beyond her window, the garden lay dark, except for a single drifting lantern, its flame bending with the breeze. Somewhere in the house, a door closed softly. Her mother's footsteps faded, her father's never approached. Livia understood that this was how Rome worked, not through spectacle, but through quiet decisions made behind stone walls, where the gods and the law shared the same breath. She lifted the vial and tasted the herbs. The bitterness moved slowly across her tongue, spreading warmth through her limbs. Not release, not salvation, but the illusion of gentleness in a city that had forgotten softness. She lay back, watching the lantern glow waver against the ceiling like a trembling star. Her breaths grew slower, her thoughts lighter. She remembered the olive tree in the garden, the one that never bore fruit. She wondered if anyone would notice when it finally withered. When dawn crept into the room, her father did not weep. He simply ordered the servants to prepare the house. A false illness would be announced, a swift burial arranged. The senator would receive respectful condolences. The neighbors would murmur at the misfortune. Rome would move on. And Livia's name would slip into the quiet corners of memory, the kind no historian writes, the kind the gods hear more clearly than men. Her brothers were not allowed to see her. Her mother stood at the doorway, fingers trembling against the frame, her face pale as pressed linen. She did not cross the threshold. She did not trust herself to stay silent if she did. The household returned to its order with chilling ease. The fountain was refilled, the dogs released. The maid swept the corridor outside Livia's chamber as if sweeping dust from an unused room. Yet something had shifted. At night, the mother would sit beneath the olive tree, listening to the wind move through the leaves, whispering her daughter's name into the darkness. Some mornings, a lamp in the atrium flickered without touch. Some evenings, the fig bowl on the family altar remained inexplicably empty. The servants claimed the house felt colder. The mother did not disagree. Rome had always believed silence was strength, but in this house silence had become a ghost. Livia was never meant to be remembered, that was the point. But here, in the quiet breath of a forgotten story, she rises again. If her life touched you, if you believe that voices buried by time still deserve to be heard, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which state you are watching from. I read them all.